everybody, Ben Nelson here. Time for another episode of the Everyday Real Estate Investor Podcast. Thanks for listening in again. Really appreciate the ability to just put myself out there and teach from what I've learned and still learning every day. But I just want to make sure that I'm sharing from the knowledge that I've gained, the mistakes that I've made, and challenging people to again not let the busyness of life, any of the excuses that we can so often come up with to not do something, get in the way of your goals with investing in real estate. So thanks again for listening in, and hopefully that these are helping you to do that and move forward and take action in your real estate investing, whether that's starting out or scaling past where you are currently, and not letting those hurdles stop you wherever you're at in your journey. So that's the whole point here. Spur everybody on, encourage each other, learn from each other, because we're better together. We're all learning. We're all growing as we're doing this and becoming better every day. That's the goal. So today we are going to talk about negotiation and the art of persuasion, because however you go about this business, for the most part, there are things you can do that are a little bit maybe more behind the scenes. There's so many ways you can be involved in real estate investing other than just your traditional buying a rental property. There's lots of behind the scenes stuff. There's you can be involved in notes and things like that, but for the most part, and even then, you're dealing with people, right? But a lot of what you do in real estate for the most part is you're dealing with people, right? You're going to be dealing with a real estate broker. You're going to be dealing with your team. A lot of times people are dealing directly with sellers, which is great because you can get to the heart of what they're wanting. And you have to be able to have this piece in your tool belt and get better at communicating and at negotiating and at the art of persuasion, because that's how you make things happen and that's how you create agreement, which is what we're after, right? We're after an agreement from the property owner to sell us their property, and so we have to help them get to that decision, right? So I want to start off first though with talking a little bit about what persuasion and negotiation is not, because I think the words and the whole salesperson thing that kind of lumps in with this as well, they can have negative connotations to them, right? So the whole, oh, that salesperson can sell ice to an Eskimo, and oh, you're so great at persuasion, and with the idea of like you're convincing someone to do something, right? You're making somebody do something that they don't want to do, essentially, right? And that is absolutely not what we're talking about, and that is not true negotiation. That's strong arming someone into doing something, seeing who can take more from the other person. Who's going to win that tug of war, convincing someone to do something, especially when it's detrimental to them, it's not in their best interest. These are not the kinds of things that we want to attribute to negotiation and persuasion. Do people use the art form of persuasion in those ways? Absolutely. Absolutely they do, because you can use, it's like, any piece of knowledge, any tool you can use for good or for evil, right? So, the same is true with negotiation. People can be really, really good at negotiation, really good at persuading people, and they can use it in a very negative way, and people do that. That is not what I'm promoting. But the reason why I want to put this out there is because I want you to understand that there can be a positive side to this, right? It doesn't have to be a negative, and I don't want you to turn your mind off to hearing about this just because you hear the words and have that negative connotation to it in your mind, and so you kind of tune it out, or you're like turning this episode off because I don't want to manipulate people. I don't want to learn how to do that. That's not what we're talking about. Okay, we're not talking about manipulating people. We're not talking about convincing people to do something that's negative for them, that's detrimental to them. That's absolutely not what we're talking about. Negotiation is in its essence, and persuasion is negotiation is basically you're uncovering clues to discover a problem, and then you find a solution for it. And persuasion is basically a discovery process in helping someone get to an end result that they're probably already after, and you're helping discover that and you're persuading them to do something, but you want to be persuading them to do something that's in their best interest, and that's actually already the way that they're wanting to go, and they may not even know it, right? So let's jump into this. After now that we've talked about what negotiation in general isn't and what it is, and again, uncovering clues, finding a solution to a problem, right? We talk about this a lot on the podcast. Is you're a problem solver. You're finding problems. You're providing solutions. So I'm going to start out with the history, a little bit of history, Latin history with the art form of persuasion. And so if you haven't heard of this before, bear with me here, but this idea of ethos, pathos, and logos. And this goes back way to I should know this, Greek history with the art form of persuasion. And I'm going to break these down really quick for you. So ethos is basically an appeal to the credibility of the presenter. So that's you. If you're showing up to meet with a seller, you're talking to a broker on the phone or in person, your credibility and their trust in you and how you appeal to them and with that credibility and can they trust you? Do you have credibility in what you're saying is obviously extremely important. And we talked about in the past, this was in the context of doing a remodel on a home about the primacy and recency effects. And this comes into play with this for sure. So primacy being the first thing that people make a snap judgment, right? When they pull up to the front of a house, they decide usually before they walk in the door if the house is even going to be a contender for them. So the first thing they see, that's what they're going to remember. That's what makes that first impression. And then everything else is basically trying to convince them in their mind of what they've already decided. Okay, this house looks amazing. I want to buy this house. They walk in and they try to justify buying the house, right? Or vice versa. This house is a dump. I don't like the street. I don't like what I first see when I pull up. The house may be beautiful inside, but they've already decided, and so now they're looking for excuses of why they shouldn't buy the house instead of looking for reasons to buy it. So it's very much the same thing when you're presenting yourself. You show up, you have to show up with your A game. You have to show up. Now, it doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes. Doesn't mean you have to be a robot. You want to be personal, right? But you have to be presentable. You have to be able to talk the talk. You have to be able to have a conversation, be confident and relatable and conversational and all of those things for them to have that view of you that you're credible. And again, when they first meet you, what are they going to see when they first meet you? Are you put together? Are you walking, handshake? All that stuff comes into play with how they perceive you, and then they're gonna work to try to justify what their preconceived notions are, their initial thoughts about you with how you present yourself further from there. So you don't want to be fighting an uphill battle because your first approach, your first impression was a negative one, right? So let's start it off on a positive foot. So they're working to confirm that this is someone that they want to be working with, and not fighting against, this is someone I don't want to be working with, and now you got to reconvince them basically, right? So okay, so the first part is ethos. That's your credibility as the person showing up, presenting an offer, whatever you're doing in that meeting. Pathos is the appeal to the emotions of the audience. So your audience is your seller, your broker, whoever you're talking to, that you are trying to work towards presenting an option with them and wanting to work with them in some capacity. So you need to be appealing to their emotions. And so that means back to discovery, right? So you have to figure out, you're in detective mode. What is this person's state of mind? What are their beliefs? What are their preconceptions? What is in their head that I can find out that tells me about how they think, so that I can appeal to that, right? Because there are lots of things that you don't want to say unless you know that that's how the other person thinks as well, right? You obviously politically, you think for sure, like you got to be really careful what you say, because whether you believe it or not, probably meeting with a seller is not the place to start spouting your political beliefs unless they put it out there first and that you're in agreement with them. Or even if you're not, if you have a piece that you can add to it to somewhat affirm their belief, now you're getting on their side, right? Now you're appealing to their emotions, you're appealing to their belief system, you're appealing to those things. That's going to create a connection that is going to play to your benefit down the road, right? So people want to be connected to who they're working with. They want to feel that connection, that emotion, and again, it just kind of actually further helps the ethos portion of the character, right? To them, that helps improve their view of your character, right? And then logos is basically a logical appeal or a logical presentation. So you're taking this pathos portion, you're figuring out where the emotions, what's their connections, what their beliefs are, where they're trying to go, and then you're presenting a logical solution, and it has to be logical or someone's not going to accept it, right? But one very key piece that I want to make sure that is clear in here is that logical is not logical to you, because that's where a lot of people can get tripped up in negotiation and in trying to put together a solution for someone, is either assuming that something that they need to work is not logical going to be logical to the seller, so they don't put it out there, right? Like, oh, the seller's never going to take this, so it's not logical, I'm not going to put it out there. Or they assume that what they would want, right? That's usually what it is, right? I would never take this, so I'm not going to present this because this is dumb. Why would they say yes to this? And your reasons for saying yes to someone are not the seller's reasons. Okay, they have a different story. They have a different place they're trying to go. They have different things they're trying to accomplish. So don't put your preconceived notions of what's logical onto them, because what's logical to you may not be logical to them, and what's logical to them may not be logical to you. So this is a very important point, because it's not your logic. It's not what's logical to you. It's what's logical to them. What helps make sense to them and what gets them where they're going. And I will say that if you don't know what that is, you haven't spent enough time appealing to the emotional side, and you're just trying to fit them in a box, right? You haven't played enough detective. You haven't discovered. You haven't done the things necessary to dig into what the seller situation is to be able to present something that's logical to them, and that is going to appeal to what they're trying to get after. So that's really what we're after. Again, is we're discovering what it is that they're trying to get, what they're after, what their end result is that they would like, and then we are putting together a proposal that still works for us, but that totally fits with what they've told us, whether they know they've told us or not. Because again, a lot of it should be conversational, right? You're just getting to know them, and you're putting it together in this package that just totally makes sense for them. Like, wow, this is exactly what I needed. How this structure to work? This just works perfectly, and it's all because you played detective and you discovered and you listened. And I'm going to stop right there, because that is one of the biggest pieces of negotiation, is listening. You going in there and saying, hey, you want to appeal to the credibility side, right? You want them to know you're credible. You want them to know you can perform. But you going in there and spouting all this stuff about how many properties you bought and what you're going to do to the property, and how many backers you have with your financing and whatever, anything that's going to convince them that you're the guy to buy it because you can perform. That's fine. That's great. They care, but they don't. Okay, they want to know that you can buy the property, and that you're credible and all that. But unless they start asking those questions, it really almost is irrelevant. You really more want to just appeal to them as a person. That's how you build real credibility, is by listening and asking questions. Be interested in them. Don't try to be interesting, right? They said, don't try to be interesting, try to be interested. Listen to them, ask questions, ask them what they're trying to accomplish, ask them about their goals, moving forward, moving away from this property that you're talking to them about buying, and really try to understand their situation. And I can tell you from experience that very seldom, when you do that, very seldom do people even ask all those other questions that they probably should be asking. And you may offer some of that up anyway, but they're not going to dig as deep as they maybe would if you didn't make that connection and you weren't doing it in that way, because you've gained their trust. And again, the point isn't to gain their trust to take advantage of them. The point is to gain their trust to help them get where they're trying to go, right? But my point is you're by appealing to the emotional side of it, by doing that discovery and by really trying to understand their scenario and where they're trying to go, the credibility piece almost takes care of itself, because now you're someone that cares about them. You've showed you care. They can trust you. You've gained their trust, and so now those questions, can you buy? Yeah, I'm sure they can buy it. They said they're here. Whether you can or not, right? Sometimes you figure that stuff out after the fact, right? Sometimes you have to lock a property up, and then you have to go find the money for it. Well, it's a lot easier to do that and not have a bunch of questions raised by the seller if you're appealing to the emotional side and you're making that connection. So, another couple key points in persuasion and trying to have this agreement, right? We want to find commonality. I've kind of touched on these a little bit in some of the other, we were talking about ethos, pathos, and logos, but find commonality and points of connection and agreement. So if you can create those points of connection, and so one of the mentors that I've had over the years, he calls these, he talks about off ramps, taking off ramps. So if someone mentions something, he almost takes it to the point of, you're there and talk about anything other than the property that you're there to see. Find ways to talk about their family, their history, their hobbies, what they're into, and take those off ramps to get to know them. And eventually it will come back around to real estate. But again, in the meantime, you're building that relationship, which is key in creating an agreement that is going to work for everybody. Is that relationship? You're building that relationship. So, they mention something. Maybe they have a particular car parked in their driveway. That's a classic car. Oh my gosh! If you walk past that and you don't mention the car, you're missing the point, right? They say something about how they have a dog, right? Even if you hate dogs, you're talking about the dog and you're petting the dog and you're asking about the dog and all of that stuff, right? They have a bunch of golfing stuff on the wall, right? Or whatever sport, right? You're talking about that. You're bringing that up. Oh yeah, I love that sport. Or hey, where do you play? Or what? I mean, there's a million questions you could ask. The point is to just to look for clues walking through their home. As they're talking, they're going to say things, and that you can take that off ramp and start talking about that. So you're not just going for the kill, right? For lack of a better term. Again, that's probably a negative term because that's not where we're after agreement, not after the kill. But we're not just going for the jugular. We're not just going for the, hey, I'm here. Here's the offer. Sign here if you want to do it. If not, no worry. I'm going to move on and whatever. I mean, there's people that do business that way. They shotgun it. They don't spend a lot of time on it. But to create the best agreements, you're spending time. You're getting to know people. You're understanding what they're after. That seller financing, creative terms, that doesn't happen by just showing up and throwing a number and an interest rate and a payment at somebody. It doesn't. It happens by discussion and figuring out what they're really after and then crafting that solution. And then they're like, oh yeah, this actually does work really well for what we're needing to do, right? Which you already knew because you were so good at asking questions. Another thing that we always want to remember, again, negotiation is often viewed as this butting of heads and we're on opposite sides of the table. We're this battle to try to battle out who's going to win, who's going to get the most, who's going to give up the most. And I don't look at it that way. A negotiation is yeah, there's a little bit of give and take. Okay, there is some of that, but it's not this all-out battle. It's this. Let's sit on the same side of the table. We're not on opposite sides here. We both want this to work. You want to sell your property. I want to buy your property. How can we make this work? So don't view it as you're not on opposite sides. You're on the same side, right? Opposite sides would be I don't want to sell my property. You want to buy my property. Get out of here, right? That's an opposite side. We're on the same side. I want to sell my property. You want to buy my property. That's the same side, right? So we're sitting on the same side of the table. We just have to work together to figure out what those terms look like and how do we come up with a solution that works for everybody, right? Sellers know it has to work for you. They're not dumb. Like they understand that you need to make money somehow on the property, right? Whether that's cash flow or whether that's fixing it up and adding some some value that way or long term, like you don't have to hide the fact that you're trying to make money. Everybody knows that if you're an investor and you're upfront and that's your conversation, unless you're hiding what you're doing. If you're upfront about who you are and why you're buying the property, they understand that. Okay, they understand. Again, you're showing up with a solution. That's what you're there after. So they know that. But you're on the same side of the table. You're both working towards a common goal. So don't view it as being. You're not opposites. You're not enemies. You're working together to find that solution, right? Never going solely focused on what you need to have happen. Again, you're in discovery, you're a detective, you're trying to discover what it is they need. Yeah, you need to know what works for you. But if the conversation and the demeanor and your body language is all around what you need to happen, and especially if you are... A lot of times it takes further conversation. Like you can walk into a conversation and in the first 5 minutes you can be like, there's no deal here. Sometimes that's true, and sometimes it just takes more conversation and more relationship. And a lot of people are tight to the vest when you first meet them, right? And so they're not going to give up all that right away. They want to get to know you, and if you come in and I want this, I want this price, and I want all cash, and if you can't close in 3 weeks, then just don't most people aren't that blunt, but there are some, right? And that's fine, okay, good. Hey, and you take those off ramps and you start talking to them, you start to get to know them. You might discover that that's not 100% the case, right? They might start to soften up a little bit. They might start to show their cards a little bit more and open up a little bit more about what they're really after and what their scenario is. And that's where you can start crafting those deals. That's where you can start crafting that that conversation around what is the best way to approach this and package it together for them to fit them like a glove, right? So, but if you're only focused on what you need and what you want, you walk in and that's your perspective, you're me focused, right? You need to have a general idea of what you're looking for and what you need to work, but you need to be looking at them and what the seller needs and what the seller wants, because if you're so focused on yourself and what you need, you're not going to hear what they have to say. And as soon as they say something, that doesn't fit with what I need, right? Then all the rest of it goes out the other ear, and you're probably missing an opportunity to maybe craft something that you didn't know was there, right? Be interested, not interesting. Like I said, listen. People do business with people they know, like, and trust. So that's really, you're building a relationship, you're creating credibility, you're appealing to who they are as a person. You're not throwing out there all of who you are. You're listening to them, you're listening to their situation, their emotions, their needs, their beliefs, all of that stuff. It really doesn't matter what you believe if you're trying to negotiate with someone and have this conversation around persuasion with getting them where they're wanting to go, because you need to appeal to who they are and what they want and what their desires and goals are. So that's a quick I've done weekend seminars on negotiation, and it was not even close to enough. You could take classes and read books, and I encourage you to do all of that around persuasion and negotiation. There's some great books out there. I'll post some of them within the social media content with this podcast, just so you have some access to those books, because there's a couple great ones out there about persuasion and negotiation. So I'll make sure I post those so you guys have access to those and know where to find them. But hopefully this is helpful, food for thought. I know not everybody's meeting directly with sellers, but this I think is useful in all aspects of your life, even not just in meeting with the seller one-on-one, but again, if you're talking to another professional, you're talking to a real estate broker, these are all things to consider. Even in your personal relationship, these are very important things and things that can help you in your relationship. So thanks again for listening. I will be putting another market update out here soon. There's a lot going on in the market. Just finished up watching it was about a month old, but it was a forecast. He doesn't say forecast, but in there he says it's not a forecast, but it was by Neil Bawa. He's a syndicator, multifamily investor. I will actually include that link as well. You may or may not be in multifamily, but excellent presentation where he thinks the market's going to be going here in the next couple of years. Very broad and 30,000 foot view, but has some pretty good information in there about what he thinks is going to happen with interest rates and prices and all sorts of things. So I will try to do as good as him, but hey, if I can't, I'm going to point people to great resources all the time, because even if I can't put the perfect market update together, I'm always learning that stuff, and so I try to put out there what I can, and then point people to other resources as well. So I'm definitely not the only one that you want to be listening to. There's so many great resources out there, and so I'm never going to be the one to say, hey, just listen to my stuff. You have to listen to lots of information and make your own decisions based on those pieces of information that are out there. Draw your own conclusions, all of that stuff. So thanks again for listening. Be on the lookout for that market update, and until next week, go out and make some things happen. Go out and buy some real estate.